So good to have you right back here on Cnbc TV18. At GES 2017, it's not just about the next big idea, but the money that backs that next big idea, which brings us to our conversation with Vani Kola of Kalaari Capital, talking about innovation in India and the exit route for startups.
Kalaari has been one of the early funds in India, Vani. You came back to India many years ago to set up venture capital industry, so to speak, here. Tell us about what you see as the predominant theme of evolution since you started.
You know, I think we started with a lot of entrepreneurs coming up and saying, I am the Uber of, or I'm the Alibaba of, or I'm something of, trying to justify our innovation, our identity, and what we are doing as an entrepreneur in the context of something else that's been done before. And that's not necessarily a bad approach, but what I'm very heartened by is now I hear more and more of, this is a very unique India problem, and I want to solve this very unique India problem. Whatever that could be, I want to provide the solution at this very small ARPU, or I want this affordability of product for an Indian mass, and that's what I'm going to do. Or, you know, this information asymmetry exists, and that's very unique to India, and I want to solve that. So what we have seen is a shift to India unique problems and India-only solutions, and maybe we could export that to global in time, but rather than import something to India, and that really heartens me a lot.
If you look at some of your early investments in e-commerce, for instance, what was the innovation that you were betting on then? And in the context of where we've seen e-commerce evolve to now, become a difficult sector actually for early investors to get exits from, you know, where has that missing link or missing gap been as far as B2C e-commerce is concerned?
I'll answer that, but I think first we need to get over our obsession with e-commerce. And what's with media and India? We are so obsessed with e-commerce and so forth. In fact, our portfolio, and I think this is probably true of many venture capitalists, our portfolio is about 30% e-commerce. But because it is consumer and it's easier to understand it, we don't talk about the...
But clearly it's not easy enough to understand because, you know, the
problem is easy to understand, and what is supposed to mean is easy to understand. But I think e-commerce is surviving, thriving in many aspects, but we look at only the large platforms versus the many, many ways in which a small supplier today is providing solution, platforms that are allowing you know, offline into online, or suppliers who couldn't have reached the distribution networks across India are now leveraging technology.
Is that actually an area as a VC, Vani, that's interesting you? The B2B aspect of what e-commerce has enabled, and in that context, even the NASSCOM report actually stated that there's been a remarkable spike in the number of B2B businesses that have been just set up in the last year, 50% actually over 2016, and that's quite remarkable. Talk to us from the point of view of your portfolio.
Yeah, B2B, which is also in that context, even in particular SME, we have made a lot of investment. For example, Power to SME is a non-glamorous company in that sense, but what they do is they aggregate the procurement for small to medium businesses and provide them the pricing, delivery, and availability leverage which they would otherwise not get, and hence reduce the cost of acquisition of raw materials. And if you look at an SME business, 60 to 70% of their cost is their raw material. Now, if I could even make 2 percentage points, 3 percentage points difference for you as an SME, that's significant to your bottom line. And those are some of the examples. And for example, we have a company, Credit Vidya, that is changing how you can assess credit rating, which is non-existent for people who are not in
part of the formal banking
network or formal employment network. Then they don't receive a regular paycheck from someone, then they have no credit rating, and hence they're excluded from the financial inclusion by and large. So how do you give them a credit rating? So that's a very interesting problem that they've tried to solve. And, so I think, and Perpule, Sciency, Vernacular, a Ford plan, which is trying to bring, and sometimes they're not solving what I call as the first world problems, which means if you are working somewhere, you're insured for your health care, which is only about 10% or so of Indians. What about the rest of them? How are they getting their health care from affordability? And they try to do something where, health care from a savings and financial products that's available to access is a platform. So these are real problems for India, and they are not at all there in a developed world. And those are some of the kind of things that are very exciting today.
All right, Vani. You also traveled to China earlier this year. Kalaari also published a rather in-depth report of what some of the similarities and differences between the two startup ecosystems were. If you can tell us where the conversation regarding the comparison between India and Chinese startups should go. And I'm not talking about Alibaba, Amazon and Flipkart, because Alibaba is no startup anymore. And Didi is not a startup anymore, and neither is Ola for that matter. So talk to us about the startup ecosystem.
I think let's talk about difference first, right? The maturity of the Chinese ecosystem, and I'm not just talking about the funding ecosystem, that too, but more importantly, the consumer and the infrastructural, and infrastructure is more than the road. It's the 4G, and it is the proliferation of digital economy. That's what I mean by
also the comfort people like you and I have on transacting on mobile phones, right? Inside a WeChat window.
So that's exactly what I'm talking about, the infrastructure at a broader context. I think what's happened in India is companies have achieved scale, are achieving scale very, very fast in a way that's unprecedented for us yet here. That's a big difference, and it's something that I'm in fact very hopeful in the next decade will make happen for India. And everything that I am interested today is to create ecosystems that enables Indian startups to achieve scale rapidly. That's one point that we must conquer, acknowledge and create. But what is similar is the entrepreneurial fervor, I think, and the quality of ideating, quality of entrepreneurial interest and the volume of it that's growing in India. That I think is very similar. We are a nation on the move and a nation that has embraced entrepreneurship into our DNA and made it possible for people in multiple sectors to dream about, creating change.
With that, it's a wrap on our Women's Special episode here at GES. But our focus on the startup story just doesn't stop here.
Yes, after the break, we're going to bring you a behind-the-scenes look with the DIPP Secretary at some of India's most innovative startups that are showcasing their products and services here.
So keep it with CNBC TV18.